For the base, we have several pieces of medium weight chipboard, and I've started out with one of them on my mat here, and I've lined it up with the grid lines. And I want to draw some lines here, and each line is going to be 3 inches away from the edge. So here I'll just start by lining up my ruler and drawing a line the length that's 3 inches from this edge. And I'll do the same from this edge. I'll flip the board 90 degrees and do the same on the other 2 sides. The reason we're drawing these lines is we're going to round the 4 corners here. So I've set my compass to a radius of 3 inches. I have a good sharp point here, and I'm going to put that point of the compass in each one of these intersections and draw an arc so I can round off the corner, and I'll repeat that for the other 3 corners. And then next I'll carefully cut these corners out. These lines that we drew give you a starting point for the curve and an ending point for the curve each time. And then I'll repeat that process for the other piece of the base chipboard. Next I'll take my piece of decorative paper and lay out one of my bases on top of it. Now I'm making sure that I avoid the borders here, and I'll just trace around that. And then I like to have a little bit of a reveal along the edge. So I'm just going to cut just inside of that line all the way around. Once you've got your piece of pattern paper cut out, go ahead and put it on your piece of chipboard and make sure you're happy with the reveal. Do any fine tuning you might want to do. And then I've labeled the top, front on both of these pieces so I'll know how they go together. And next I'll ink the edges, and then I'm going to prep the edges with score tape on the back here. And I'll just use 1/8 inch on the curved edges and 1/4 inches on the 1/4 inch tape on the straight. You don't have to put anything in the body of the paper. To determine where we want our flowers, we'll start by just putting our box lid on the table. This was listed under the tools guide, just something that will allow you to raise up the base of the project. Oh, this is about 4 inches tall, just something that can raise it up at least a couple of inches. And then I'll bring in my top base and rest that on top. And first we want to determine the placement of the watering can. So you'll bring in your watering can. Now obviously mine is taking up a lot of the camera space here, so I've drawn a template of the base of the watering can so I can show you the placement that I'm going to use. So this is my template. You can see it's sized like the watering can is, and I've determined that I want to have mine at a bit of an angle. I think that'll just add a little bit of interest to it. So I'm going to take this corner here, and I'm going to have it about 1 inch in front of this intersection here, and either on the line or slightly inside of the line, and then this corner down here will come to the line. So it's at a bit of an angle. And for you, you determine where you want to have your watering can and just put a little temporary adhesive on it so it can stay in place. Obviously we can't attach it yet because we don't have the grass on here. Then bring in your little stoop and put that in place, centering it under the beneath the front door, and just put that on with a little temporary adhesive. Next we'll bring in our rocks and put them around the base of the watering can. At this point you don't need to worry about color or arrangement or anything like that. You just want to get them around the base so that you know about how much room they're going to take up. Now once you see about how much room they're going to take up, just take a pen or a marker or something and kind of draw around the edges of your rocks all the way around. And then you can remove the rocks. We don't want to have them on there in the way while we're working on this. Next, bring in your paving stones so you can get a rough idea of where you want to have your path and play around with the shape. Once you've got a rough idea of where you want your path to be, go ahead and just draw some lines so that you won't put some flowers where you want the path. Now the only other thing we have to think about placement other than the flowers is the mushrooms, but I think I'll put a few flowers in first and then start thinking about the mushrooms. So I've got my awl here, and this is an awl that can get to be a pretty wide diameter here, and I'm going to determine the placement of my first flower and press my awl in enough. You can see here I've got a test hole done. Press my awl in enough so that when I go to put my flower in, there's some resistance. Now the reason we put this up on the box was so that you'd have enough room to play kind of with the height of these flowers going up and down to determine where you want them to be. And so then I'll just determine where I want to put my next one, push my awl in a little bit, and take my next flower and put that in. So once I get a few flowers in, if I want to have mushrooms in an area, I'll bring in my mushrooms and put them there so that I can work around them. And then I'll go ahead and keep filling in with the flowers that I have. At this point I'm just working with the big stem flowers. I have about 8 of the small flowers, and I'll put them in at the end. So one of the reasons we're only working on the chipboard at this point and not with the pattern paper is in case you change your mind about the placement of a flower. Now I think you can see over here that this one ended up being a little bit too close, and so if that's the case, just make an X by the spot that you don't want and punch another hole. After I was happy with the placement of all my flowers, I drew myself a little map of where all the flowers go. And I just made a number code for the type of flower they were, and then I put my little dots on here where the holes are, and then the letters just tell me what colors they are. Next I'll remove my watering can, and then I can lift this up and remove the box. Next we need to cut these flower stems off, and we'll want them to be 1/4 of an inch longer than the chipboard here. So you can just take your Sharpie marker and make a little mark and then cut that off. Try to cut it off as square as possible. Or if you've got some heavy cutters like I do here, you can just come along and cut them right at the proper length. Now if you were like me and you have any holes that you decided not to use, I'm going to mark these on the reverse side as well. Next, use your bone folder on the back to smash these holes down a little from where the awl poked the chipboard up. That'll make it easier for our next step. Next, I'm going to use my big bite with it set to the 1/8 inch setting, and I'm going to center it on each one of these holes we did before and punch them out, and that will just give us a nice clean opening. Be careful to punch them out right on those holes. So our next step is to glue our little alphabet beads to, I'm working on the underside here of the top, and we'll put one over each one of those holes there. You can see I've got an emery board here, and that is just to remove any excess of chipboard that's poking up around those holes, so this is nice and flat. I'll use diamond glaze glossy accents. You can use some strong adhesive to put these beads in place. Just hold them down for a few minutes so they stay nice and square to the surface. I've got a cut off piece of stem here so that I make sure that the holes stay clear and I get things lined up. And I'll just put a bead on each one of my holes. I'm not putting any on the ones that I made an X by. So I found the easiest way is to put a little ring of glossy accents on the hole, stick the end of my cut off stem on there, and then I can just drop one of the little beads on there and hold it down. This is straight, and then I have perfect placement. Next we need to fill in with some support pieces to go in these empty areas where we don't have any beads. And on the cutting guide there are 3 strips of medium weight chipboard called base support, and I've already taken one of them and made these little triangles. And the way we make the triangles is we cut each of these pieces into a 6-inch section. Just cut it in 6-inch and then lightly score it at 2 inches and then again at 4 inches, just with the blade of your craft knife so it can bend like this. And then we have some extra 1/4 inch joining strip left over from the piece when we made the stoop. And I'll just cut some pieces that are about 3/4 of an inch long or so from here. And I can use those little pieces to join these into a triangle. I'll just stick one end on one end and bend it around. Work flat on your work surface because you want these triangles to stay 1/4 inch in height. And you should end up having 6 triangles when you're done. Next we'll arrange those triangles to fill in the gaps here. I've got one down here where the path is going to go, and then I've just kind of spaced out the other ones. And then to attach them, just put a generous amount of glue on the bottom and then put them down. And repeat that for the rest of the triangles. Next we can draw and cut some curved ledger strips that will go around the curved edges on the base, top, and bottom. And I have those 2 pieces here in front of me. I'm going to put one to the side, and I'm going to take one of them and tape it to my craft mat so that an end is lined up on a 1-inch mark here, and it's obviously on the 2 inches, any 2 inches, so that you've got some space below. Then I've sharpened the point on my compass and I've set it to a radius of 2 15/16. That's a 1/16 of an inch less than 3 inches. And then I'm going to count over 3 squares from the beginning of my chipboard and come down 1 inch, and I'll put the point of my compass in there, and then I'll draw an arc. And then I'll sharpen my point and again set it to 2 15/16. This time I'll count over 3 from the right and come down 1 inch. I'm going to sharpen my point again, and every time I'm going to make sure that my compass is set at 2 15/16. I'm again going to come in 3 inches. This time I'm going to come down 1.5 inches from the bottom of the chipboard and draw an arc. I'll resharpen my point and set my measurement. This time 3 inches from the right and down 1.5. I'm still coming in 3 inches. This time I'm coming 1 7/8 down, so that's 1 inch and then 7/8. And I'll draw an arc. And I'll repeat that over here on this side. Now the pieces we're going to use are this one and this one, this one and this one. This is scrap, 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 scrap. So cut these arcs out as accurately as possible. I like to use a really sharp craft knife blade on any of the inside ones, and then I can just use scissors or a craft knife blade on the outside one. And then I'll repeat that process for this other strip so that I'll end up with 8 curved pieces. So I have all my 8 curved strips cut, and I have some straight pieces of ledger strip over here. The only reason that these are black is so that you'll be able to see them more easily. Yours will just be the regular chipboard color. So I'm going to start by installing some of the straight pieces, and I'm going to put them in each of these 4 straight areas here, and I'll hold them back 1/16 of an inch from the edge on all 4 sides. So just cut them to length. They can be a little bit shorter, and hold them back 1/16 of an inch from the edge each time. Once you have the 4 straight ledger strips put in, we can put in a curved piece, and we'll just cut these to length. They have been sized so that their radius allows for that 1/16 of an inch there. So just cut them to length. It doesn't matter which section that you use. All of the outside curves on either piece will match this. So just take this, and I just have my big scissors out here for some reason, and I'll cut that to length, and I'll just use a little wet glue to install that piece. And I'll repeat that for the other corners. And I'll make sure that everything has a good burnish. Next, I can install the ledger strips on the top piece, and I have it lined up here on my craft mat in between 2 of my lines. And remember, it's 12 inches across. The middle 6 is straight, so I've just cut a ledger strip here. There's a little bit less than 6 inches, and then I can figure out exactly where to line it up just by finding that 6-inch space on my craft mat, remembering to hold it back 1/16 of an inch from that edge and putting that down. I'll repeat that on this side, the other side, and then I'll switch it this way and again line it up on my craft mat. The center 4 inches is straight here, so I've just cut some pieces that are a little bit less than 4 inches, and I can put them on the 2 straight areas on these sides. Now over here, this bead is a little close to the edge, and I'll just kind of mark and notch that out. And then I'll just take my curved pieces and cut them to length and fit them in on the corners just like we did with the bottom piece. Once we have our ledger strips, we can flip this over and we'll prep this top with some score tape. Now I'm going to use some pretty good sized pieces over here in this central zone. I'm going to put a middle one in that's only going to go about that far. And then I'll just kind of fill in other places. Now remember, the decorative paper has score tape around its edges, so you don't have to come close to these edges down here because the decorative paper has the score tape on. But you'll want to come in some of these other areas. So I'll go ahead and put mine on and then show you what it looks like. Next, I'll bring in my pattern paper, and I'm just going to put a little temporary adhesive right along this edge over here, and then I'll get this centered how I want it to be, and I'll press on that temporary adhesive. And I only want to remove the backing from one piece that's kind of in the middle. I'm going to use this piece right here, and that's the only backing I'm going to remove, and then I'll put this piece down. We're doing it that way because we need to be able to poke our holes and see what we're doing here, but we also need to be able to raise up this lip so that when we put the two parts of the base together, we'll have access to the edges all around. Now you may want to put just a little temporary adhesive kind of in 3 other spots here so this stays down. Next I want to poke the holes for the flowers through this decorative paper. So I have my mouse pad here, and I'll just go around in the center of each one of these and make a little hole. And after I've made the holes from the back side, now I can see where they are, and I'll just go ahead and poke those holes a little bit bigger. And then hold it up to the light this way and make sure you can see light through all of your beads so that you know you've got all your holes punched. Next, we're ready to join the two parts of the base together. I'm going to start out by putting white glue on all of my triangles, and then I will put diamond glaze or glossy accents around the exterior surface of each of these beads, and then I'll do that fairly quickly, and then I'll put the other piece on, making sure I've got it straight. Now the way I did this, I just took 3 of my steel blocks and put them right along the sides of that top piece that I have upside down, and then I could just slide this in on top of it, and now I'll just use them as weights. And if you don't have something like these blocks, you can find something else to put weight on this and allow it to thoroughly dry. Now that my base is completely dry, I can go ahead and fill in with the base side pieces. These are listed under the base, and if you notice they're bendy, and it says in the cutting guide that they should be bendy along their length, and that will allow us to fit them in around these curves. So what we want to do here is we'll run glue along the ledger strips, and I'm going to pick a point that's about halfway in between the long side. I'll start with one of the long sides and go to about halfway in between the short side, and then I'll continue on and do another piece that goes the next quarter, and all the time I'll try to aim for a spot about halfway in between, and that way it'll be easier to make that smooth curve. So I'll just start out by doing a dry fit and see about how long of a piece I need for that first one, and cut it to length and go ahead and put that in. Now I've just put a clamp to keep it together there on that side, and now I've come over here to this side, and I'll just do a dry fit to see how long I want to make the next piece, and keep going like that until I'm completely around. And I have added some clothespins or bulldog clamps, as you can see here, in key places just to make sure it's going to stay together until it is thoroughly dry. To finish off the edges, I've cut 4 strips of pattern paper. This came from the Patterns and Solids paper pad, and I've cut the strips 1 3/8 inch wide, 1 3/8 inch wide by 12 inches long. And then I'm going to score each one at 1/2 inch and then at 7/8. So 1.5 inch, and then 7/8 of an inch. This will make a central 3/8 inch channel coming down the middle there. And I'll repeat that for all of my strips. Then prep each one of these with score tape. I've put 1/4 inch in the middle channel, and then I have 3/8, so I've used that on both sides. If you don't have 3/8, use 1/4 inch, but keep it pretty close to the outside edges, and do that for all 4 strips. Next, I'll bring in my base, and I'll find the front. There's my front. And I'm going to start by putting a piece on the front, and I'll just remove the backing from the middle channel. And then I'll center this, just attaching that middle channel. And then on each end, I'm just going to hit that end with a little bit of my marker. And then I'll take a little of my diamond glaze, or you could use glossy accents, and then I'll just put it behind where this end is coming, because there'll be some stress on this because of the bend, and that'll just guarantee that it won't move. And I'll do that on all the ends as I put them in. Once I have the ends firmly in place, on the bottom side, I'm going to remove the score tape backing. And then I'll find where the curve is starting, which is about here. In between those tick marks that I just made, I don't have to make any little slits. But after those tick marks, to go around the curve, I'll make my cuts about every 3/16 of an inch. And just come straight down with my scissor point like we've done before. And then I'll just gradually work these around the side until I can put them in place. And eventually, of course, we'll burnish that. Now up here on the top, we'll do the same thing. We'll just gently pull this back so that it doesn't get in the way. If when you fold this over, it's going to overlap on any of your score tape backing that you've got there, just remove a little bit of that so that it won't get caught underneath. And do that side the same way. And then on both the left and the right sides, I'll take another strip of my banding here. I've added some glossy accents right there to the end. And I'll just again do the middle channel first, and then make my slits and do my wrapping. And then on the back, there's just a little short piece to put here, and so I'll just take this. I haven't removed any score tape yet, or score tape backing, and I'll just measure it to length and install that short little piece that goes in the back there. And then of course you'll want to burnish in place, so just gently hold this top piece up and burnish here. I kind of bring it in from the edges, especially on the corners, and then flip it over and give the bottom a good burnish as well. And then we can just reach in and remove the score tape backing from the pieces that are on the base, and as well as the pieces on the edge of the pattern paper for the top, and go ahead and burnish that down in place. Now that you have this all done, kind of check, especially near the edges, and see if there are any holes that got covered up by the paper. And I have this one that was real close to the edge here, and I'll just repunch it so that I know where it is. And now we have a nicely finished base. Next, I'm going to mark with some Post-its where my watering can is going to go. When I placed mine, I placed it 3 inches in from the left side, and 4 inches down was one of the corners. So I used a couple of Post-its to mark that location. And then I'll bring in my watering can and line up that corner with that corner on my post-it note. And then this front corner was 3 inches back from the edge, so I'll mark that as well. Once I have that marked, I'm just going to look around my holes and make sure that looks about right. And then I'll just take some post-it notes. These are 1.5 inch wide post-it notes, which is about the same size as my angled sides there. And I'll just put one on each side. And then I'll have it all mapped out where I'm going to attach the watering can. And then just bring the watering can in and out a few times so that you feel comfortable lining it up with those post-its, or if you need anything else to help guide you in. Because what we're going to do next is put some blobs of glue on the bottom of the watering can and then lower it into position. So I was pretty generous with my blobs of glue, and now I'm just going to lower it into position. And once I know I've got it in the proper position, I'll just put a little pressure on that for a few minutes. Once my watering can has set up, I'll add my little stoop. I've just put some little dots of glue on the bottom here, and I'll put that right underneath the front door. Next, I'll bring in all of my stones and play around with the placement around the base of the watering can. Now that I have my rocks arranged how I like them, I'm going to use some E6000, or you could use any strong, thick glue that will work when attaching a non-porous substance. Now we're ready to add flowers, and I've got my little map out here so I can tell what flowers are going in what location. And I'm just going to do a kind of a circle of flowers. I want to be able to reach in to put leaves on, so I won't put any flowers in the way that will prevent me from reaching in to attach some leaves. And it may be that you even want to skip a hole so you'll be able to get in there to attach a leaf. I think I can reach in there though, so I'm going to put kind of my innermost circle of flowers in place. And to do that, I'm just going to squirt a little diamond glaze or glossy accents down inside of the hole. And then put the flower in. Make sure, look at it from a couple different directions to make sure that it is standing straight in all directions, and then move on to the next flower. Now once you get your flowers, they're stable, you can attach some leaves. Just pull the leaves apart a little bit here. You can see there's a little opening there, and put some glue down in that opening. And then decide where on your flower you want the leaf, kind of go in different directions. And just pinch it on there and hold it for a few minutes until the glue grabs on. And you can put as many or as few leaves on your flowers as you want. Now once I have that first kind of ring of flowers put in and the leaves on, then I can finish up the remainder of the flowers. Next I'll add the mushrooms, and I think you can see I have one little group of 3 right here, and then there's a group of 2 right over here underneath the handle, and I'll attach these and then I'll turn it around so you can see where I put the other ones. And then on the back corner underneath the spout, I've added these 3 mushrooms. And then here on this corner, I've added these 2 mushrooms. Next Next, I'm going to lay out my paving stones to make a little path to the front door. And once I've decided on a layout that I like, I'll just take each one up and put a little dab of glue behind it and glue it in place. And then I'm going to fill in with my little flowers. I have 8 of these, and so I'll just put them just wherever I feel like a little spot could be filled in. And I've clipped off the end of the toothpick. Here's one that still has the point on it. And then I will show you how I'm going to put them in. So I'll decide on a placement, and I think I'm going to put this orange one right here. And I'll just take my awl and poke it down in there. I might have to wiggle it around a little bit. And then I'll check it for height. And unlike the big flowers, these I'm going to put a little leaf on them before I glue them in, because they're just too small to work on once they're glued in. So I've just got one of my little leaves here, and I'll attach it to that flower. And then I'll just fill in with the rest of my little flowers here and there. And last, we'll add our little flowers up to the window boxes. And I'm just taking some of my small leaves and attaching them first to the frame there. And then I'll just add a little bit of glue and I'll put in my flowers. And now we have the little flowers in the window boxes. And that completes the construction of the upcycled watering can.